I'm Lola.
And I'm Mamuna. Together, we've a combined 35 years of experience within the tech scene in North America and Europe.
We talk about the highs, the lows, the WTFs of navigating the technology industry and answer your questions about navigating tech careers.
This is Lost in Tech. Back, Michael. Come back, Michael.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah, sing. Go
Hi.
ahead.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Michael. We haven't seen you in so long. How are we doing?
I know. So good. I mean, I'm clearly in a new space and I haven't set up my desk yet, but until then I have this comfy couch.
So nice. I think that's the theme of like late 24, early 25 for us is in transition.
Transition.
Very much.
Transition.
In transition. Yeah. In transit. Yeah. Just chugging along with life.
We're just
but we're doing
evolving.
It. We're moving. We're grooving.
Yeah. A little bit like the tech market.
A little bit.
Oh, mic drop. You know what? I was trying to think the other day, if I had to describe the tech market ecosystem in one word, what it would be. I couldn't think of the word. What do you all think?
A traumatizing shit show.
Oh.
Sorry. I don't know how else to describe it right now.
It's interesting. Back in the late 2010s, I don't know what those are called, but I feel like tech was like the hot thing to do. Everyone wanted to be in it. And now you have a lot of people who are in tech questioning whether they still want to stay in tech, whether they are doing the right things in tech. I find it to be really interesting. I feel like the change was really rapid.
Well, so be careful what you wish for, right? Because I know we always used to say, like when we started this podcast, we were like, everybody's a tech worker. They just don't realize it yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think before everyone's actually become a tech worker, the principles of tech hiring have started to infect other places. And the first place in the US is government jobs. But it's not just in the US because countries in Europe are looking at what's happening in the US and applying the same principles. So like the UK is looking to axe certain government departments. Like they announced a massive cutout of a government department called NHS England. It's like a overseeing body last week. And it was so sudden and it was absolute. It was like, it was very
abrupt,
musky Trump, kind of abrupt. It's just cut. It's Doge happened in the UK. And so as much as, again, everyone's not a tech worker yet, but they're certainly feeling the fire of the tech employment model at this particular point in time, which is not how I would have liked to introduce people to the world of tech and tech employment. But it's interesting.
Well, speaking of trends and how they catch on, I remember earlier, a couple of years ago, right, there was a concept of the great flattening.
Oh, yes.
As one of the things that came about.
As it continues.
As it continues.
Yeah.
And so I feel like over the past several years, there have been just a number of trends. I don't even know, coined terms that have come up that have had influences outside of like inside tech. One company does it and the rest are like, oh, that looks good, or we have the freedom to do that, or shareholders love that, let's do more. And then it influences outside of tech.
They're all also in the same WhatsApp group, right? Let's be real. So it's like, hey friend,
100%.
I'm gonna do this thing in my company, you should copy it. Ooh, tell me how it works and I'll do it too. And then and this is what happens in the cup. So is it like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure the same thing exists in the US and Canada as well, where you have like an inflation basket. Have you guys heard of this? So my understanding of like in the UK, how they calculate inflation is they have a basket of goods. Okay. And every now and then they check in on the price of those items. And it's things like bread and eggs and milk.
Oh, interesting.
The like consumer staples. And then occasionally over time, they might swap one thing out for another. Like I think there was one point they introduced like a mobile phone contract. And what they'll do is they'll look at the price change in those items between 2 points in time, and that tells you what the inflation rate is. Now, that's a very oversimplified breakdown of how they calculate inflation, but it's basically like if the staples prices change significantly, you've got higher or lower inflation in a particular place. And I feel like these WhatsApp groups are like the same concept for like what's going to happen in tech next year or even this year is literally like you can probably take the temperature of what's happening in these WhatsApps, in these groups, in these friendship circles of there aren't very many people like us. And so we have to make these decisions in our vacuum. And that is going to tell you what's going to happen to the whole labor market for a period of time. Yeah.
I do wonder if there are rogue individuals who maybe are hoping to just do it and then others follow, or they're hoping to, like, I remember when, did Chesky say it first, or was it Andreessen that did the founder mode?
It was Chesky.
Chesky?
Yeah. He was taken out of context and then Paul Graham kind of.
Graham. Yeah. I do wonder if they have these ideas for how they want to approach, or even pulling out like death of the product manager, which really wasn't death of the product manager, but it was fun to say. I do wonder if some of them are like, I feel strongly about this thing. I have strong conviction. Gonna rip the Band-Aid and see what other people do, or I don't care what other people do. I'm just gonna do it.
So I have a nuanced response to that because in the last week, I have been dealing with a founder who I have a huge amount of respect for. But I have noticed something that I think actually is a feature of being a successful founder. Which is you have to believe in yourself so much, even when other people say you can't. And there is an implication here, which is even when other people, maybe they're not saying you can't, but they're saying, hey, you might want to pause, or I don't know if you're fully aware, or it then looks like, no, you're questioning me. I can't have that. I've got to do this. And I think that WhatsApp group of founders, they have one fallacy that, I think is like even informing my way that I show up to work, which is, so many of them are college dropouts. And I'm going to bet that none of them studied social skills or philosophy. And what they are is self-taught philosophers, and they're self-taught, in the way that they think about first, second, and third principles. They think about it in production terms. They think about it in manufacturing terms. They think about it in input-output value. And they ignore human. Yes. They ignore the complexities of human. And so they're not fully self-aware about their own inner complexities or the gaps in how they think about the implication of what they're doing. And so they're just missing a key input. We're not going to say that everything they've done is wrong because, most of us wouldn't be employed, right? But if you're missing that philosopher's ability to look around an entire subject. And I think you and I have worked with people who believe they do that. They believe they do a 360.
Yes.
But without question, that 360 always ignores the human component.
Yes.
It always assumes something about a human's adaptability. Not to say we're not adaptable, but it's absolutely always missing the human part. And so they just push ahead, and they have to believe that they know better. And then you combine that with this, nobody ever believed in me more than I believed in myself. And so even though you're telling me something, you're wrong, I'm right. And I absolutely can apply it to anything I put my mind to, which again, they're not wrong. They're just missing
it.
But that humanity part.
I think that is a thing that people oftentimes capture as bold, innovative. That's a thing that people really applaud when they come out on the other side, even though it potentially has burned a number of trees along the way,
It's the modern day equivalent of our community strongman. Yeah. Right? Like in feudal times or in gangs and societies, you're always looking for the strongest man and the person who would knock everything down, and everyone reveres what looks like strength.
Yeah.
Becoming a tech billionaire is our modern day version of a strongman, and that's exactly what they are.
Yeah. And that's influencer culture.
It is influencer culture, and it's also how honestly, they're being rewarded for it. Like it's a very positively reinforcing scenario that we're in. So, who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. But I definitely think there's a human cost
Agree.
that comes with adapting tech's approach to recruiting and team development right now to other industries. And the way in which people have been forced into that, it's incredibly, it makes the entire thing polarizing by default. And again, what happens then is you miss things that could add value or improve outcomes overall. And we won't really know how good or bad this was for society for maybe another 30 years. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good transition into a topic we can really dive deeper into to put some
Let's go back into what we
grounding.
know.
Yeah. Some grounding into this, which is the concept of flattening, which you told me earlier came from Coinbase initially.
Yeah.
It
I
was
think
like
the first one I heard about was Coinbase got rid of all of their leadership. Everybody who was a manager. And I think Robinhood did the same thing at one point, and it was just like
Meta, like a bunch of companies
done
did.
it. Yeah.
And so we see across most tech companies a push for less managers, less leadership, and more crafters, ICs doing the work day to day.
Productive people.
Yes, and also as an implication of that, we see a number of the people who are in leadership. There is the expectation, which some companies we work at do require this, but there's an expectation for you to be almost a crafter in a sense, right? Like you can get down to the level of the IC. You can also participate at the ground level conversations as well.
Yeah.
Now, just for my sake, IC, what is that?
Yes.
Individual contributor.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hate acronyms, so.
Yes, I hate acronyms too. So,
so if you're a specialist, then you're an IC.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was a way to differentiate this idea that a craft person who is an individual contributor, they don't manage other people. They're not responsible for shouldn't. That's something, we'll come back to that. Not responsible for team health or hiring or all of these things that occupy the time of a manager. Their job is to optimize craft output. So they'll be your example of the best crafter, so the best developer in the team, the most senior one. And actually, development engineering has had the best example for this for a while, because in some fairly large companies, like I think Microsoft and Salesforce, they even had like numbered systems. So you could be like a developer 1, 2, 3, 4, or you could go into like an EM, which is like engineering manager. And they were completely different tracks for a really long time. And I think in the last 5 years, other areas of tech adopted a similar model, maybe not with the numbers, but this concept of like there being two pathways where you could grow as an IC or grow as a manager. And I think actually that's what, not adopting that earlier is what created the problem that caused the flattening. Because the only way, because if for example, the only way for you to grow in a company is to become a manager, and you've been around for a while, and they have no other mechanism to give you a salary increase or a scope increase, you're going to get promoted. And so these companies that grew exponentially inside just created these very tall promotion ladders where you had to give someone somewhere to go or they would leave. And, certainly up until the last 2 years, regrettable attrition, which is, what you call when someone leaves when you don't want them to, that was seen as way more important than anything else. Like hiring and retaining people was seen as like the thing to do, and the cost of rehiring and retraining was tracked. Now we've kind of pivoted into a market where like people are dispensable, and if you want to leave, they might still call it regrettable attrition, but they don't really care how high that goes in some companies right now. So the individual contributor path, if that had been, I think, appropriately recognized by like these more modern tech companies that are like in the 20-year-old range, we probably wouldn't have ended up with these tall promotion stack companies where you had a lot of levels of management between like the IC and leadership as they saw it.
That's interesting, because within the IC sphere, I feel like people who want to grow as an independent contributor, don't necessarily do that inside of a typical org structure. I find that there are a lot of freelancers who uh, end up doing quite well for themselves,
Mm.
being serial
ICs.
independent contributors for
Mm.
different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, and I don't know what you think, Mamuna, I would agree with that in as much as when you're an employee, you take on all of these horizontal responsibilities, even if
Yeah.
you are like an individual contributor in the team. And those expectations are not applied to a freelancer.
No.
And so a freelancer gets to come in, do the job, heads down,
out.
get that craft done, and step out. And so you're right in that. So let's talk about user experience, which is where I have a good practical experience. Freelancing user experience, I definitely agree that a lot of people become very, very high level crafters in doing research studies at various levels, or being able to do like an information architecture assessment for like a product, or like crank out some new digital UI concepts in like very quickly at a very high level with no training or no training support needed. The thing they're missing though,
Mhm.
and this is still interesting as we talk about like how people develop, and I don't know if you found this, is they don't acquire the political chops to survive
No.
tech companies. So if they ever want to
Right.
come in-house, I've
Really
seen
different.
very skilled, and they're not, they might be senior. It's like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I know what I'm doing. But you can't put them in certain roles because they don't know how to manage up. They know how to
Mhm.
manage a client, but they don't know how to manage stakeholders up.
Develop lasting relationships such that
Yeah.
in conflict, you're able to resolve and continue to work, versus if you're a freelancer, you could just quit. You
Right.
don't, you don't have to deal with it,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, this client is getting to be too much trouble. I'm going to move on. Or
Just find another job.
yeah. Yeah, I think as a contractor, you have a lot of options, which is different, I would say.
Yeah. So the flattening kind of came, I would say, at a time when tech companies had started to do this recognition path of like, I need to give somebody who is an individual contributor a way to become more senior and earn more money over time that doesn't involve just making them a people manager. And in the company, I remember one company I was at the time when this was becoming a topic of conversation, we had shit managers who had been
Mm.
promoted into management because they needed a level up, but they were not very good at people. And two, there was also a ceiling on how many managers you could ultimately have. So there was a real worry about losing talent that was ambitious and driven and motivated, but there was nowhere to put them. And so it felt like you had to create space, and you had to make it work.
I find it interesting, the concept of the flattening, because I agree. People promote it up as a means of retention.
Mhm.
But I also feel like in the time that we were in, there was just, it was like a time of like luxury. People were like, more people, more seniors, more leadership. Like there was no real sense of duplication in roles. Like it was just, people were kind of collecting individuals, collecting knowledge, and I find it interesting because as we entered into this new space, people started to really say, okay, do we have duplication in roles? Do we really need to be investing in this area? It became, we started to have more discernment in the types of people and focuses we were having, which, really, did we need to hire? Like some of the hiring goals we had.
A few episodes ago, I talked about being pulled up by my manager because they had been doing some tracking metrics and they'd identified that I was underhired in my team. So every other team had more people and I had less people. And a product director had complained that they didn't feel like I had enough resources for the work that they wanted to do. And I pushed back massively and I said, I run lean teams for a reason.
Right.
Because it forces you to be accountable to what are you actually even doing, right? Why are you doing this? What value is it going to give? And how are we going to make sure that we see that? It allows me to be a much better manager. And honestly, it was good that I did not run a fat team, because when layoff season hit,
Right.
it's not that we were unaffected, but it was very obvious to me that there was bloat, and the pushback at the time was like, the product requirements aren't even clear enough.
Yes.
So you want me to have extra people because you think you've got all of this work, but all of this work is not ready for my team. And when it's ready for my team, I will find you the resources. But until then, I'm going to hold that tension. The issue I took at the time was being made to seem like I wasn't doing my job because I didn't have
Being
enough
too
people.
frugal.
Because I didn't have enough people. And I was like,
That's
this
not
is not
the problem.
it's
That's not
not
the
numbers
issue.
in a spreadsheet game. Yeah. And again, how did we get here? We were hiring to a number. There was a time
mindset
5 years ago. It's like, oh, you just did a Series B or a Series C or a Series D.
Yeah.
Go hire 5,000 people.
Yes.
Yeah, let's just get even more people in. And it's like,
Get
let's
them
go
in the
talking
door.
to someone, and before they tell you what their revenue is, they're like, yeah, we're a company of 2,500 employees, and that's somehow a performance bar. I was like, that's a liability on your books.
Right. Because now if you have to go backwards and say, hey, what is the team working on, and are they producing results? Crickets.
And this is the other thing. And don't get me wrong, there is a point where being under-resourced is harming your revenue potential.
Totally.
Right?
I think you're saying something different though here.
Yeah. So I think it's tech companies got into a habit that the bigger the team, the more successful the company. And I have one more rant to contribute to this, because I feel like the flattening was an obvious thing.
Yes.
The other rant, which I think I've mentioned again in the show, but it's something that I've always done in every company I've been: know how your company makes money. And far too many managers and people in leadership roles didn't understand the business model. They understood their budget, if even they had a hand in putting it together, because I've met a lot of director level people who've never had to put together a budget, which, again, I've also worked in companies where I was a director and they did not require me to do that, which was wild, blew my mind. Know how your budget is put together, know where the money's coming from, so that you know how to read the room when the wind changes. Okay, one last rant.
You should probably address the fact that you moved.
I did move. So I got kicked out of one room where my company's having meetings, and I've now been allowed into another room, but I probably got like 20 minutes before the next set of people just randomly walk in. That's what happens when you got 20 people with keys. Okay. So when you don't know how your company makes money, and I think this links to one of our so what about the great flattening and like thinking about career growth and development. Like, if you don't know how your company makes money, you can't read the room when shit starts to change, right? Like a bad earnings quarter, a reduced forecast for full year income. Like, you have to look at these things, because there are people whose job it is to make the money fit, and your salary, your benefits, even like, we pay taxes, but in most developed countries, the company pays taxes on each employee on behalf, whether that's in pension or additional insurance or whatever. So like, you are a cost to the company that can be cut if you are not adding value that the company needs, despite an economic outlook that isn't great. And I'm not saying everybody's responsibility is to anticipate their job has got to be delivering value, but what we saw was, I saw a lot of leaders and managers and people managers who didn't know how their company made money. And so when they needed to reorient their expectations of, should I carry on hiring? Should I expand my team? Should I blow the full year's budget on this thing that I wanted to do, or should I rethink it? They didn't anticipate those things. And I think all of this leads to, like, senior leadership feeling like, well, I might as well give myself back all of those decisions. And then what is this middle manager for? Because they don't understand it. They're not helping me reduce my costs. They're not helping me optimize my output. So they might as well get out of the way. And I think if you're in the situation now where you're like either an IC or a people manager, you have to read the room. If you plan on staying in a company, you need to look at what is happening economically. How do they make money? When does it look good? When does it look not so good? And also, what is getting rewarded? Because your reality is you're ultimately going to have to do the thing that gets rewarded to not just get promoted, but to keep your job, right? Ultimately. And I think the distance we sometimes had in tech, so this idea of company got funded to companies making enough money to keep itself going, has negatively affected most people's perception of what it looks like to be gainfully employed, because they just don't understand when there isn't enough money in the pot to pay you. And this is why I think it applies to government, because government doesn't make money that way, right? So there's a lot of jobs, but nobody's necessarily drawing the line between income and expenditure in such a way that it's,
So let's take a step back, right? So we've been talking about this term of the great flattening. And as you mentioned there, it's like basically the pull out of that middle management layer to an extent. And you have more, we have more people directly managing individual contributors.
Yes.
And so with this structure now, you have like these high level managers potentially managing a lot of less senior individuals, right? Where you used to have like senior managers, directors, whatever, you may have more of a gap in there.
Yeah.
And so now as you have two people here, you have your individual contributors who are like, hey, what does growth career development look like for me naturally? And then you have your senior people on top saying, how do I retain the knowledge I have on my team? Or as we talked last time, maybe I am not a strong leader, or maybe I don't have, I've not been given permission to hire or to grow. Yeah, you're a disempowered manager, basically, or leader.
Yeah.
I can't grow my team. I can't do anything with my team. So what am I to do? And you're in this like place of like, okay, well, we'll just see what happens. And so like, let's talk about those two dynamics, because they're very real for people right now.
What would you, like, where would you start? Who would you help? Or like, where does your experience lend itself to those two ends?
I'd probably say I could take manager. I think I did manager last time. You want to switch?
No, but we do both. We've been ICs, we've been managers, we've lived in, I mean, I know we've got things to say for everybody, but it's, let's start in like,
dole it out.
Yeah, let's dole it out. Like, what would you advise the manager in that situation who's now got, like, let's just say this is now very senior leader, very large team, potentially ICs at different levels of their career, but you're now responsible for all of their needs.
Yes. So the first thing, which may be against what a number of companies want us to do, right, is that you kind of have to tap into your individual. So I think now more so than other times, there's a tendency to not care too much about the human component of work. And it is just the impact and what they produce. But really, if you really want to keep people, then you have to understand who they are, right? And so it's going to take you having a conversation with each individual across the team to say, you know, what are your goals? What are your ambitions? Because you as a leader have to be not only creative in your solutioning for the product, but also for your team. So you may not have a next level to give a person, but you may have a new like responsibility that you can help use to create a new like skill set for them. So let's say a person wants to be a leader, but we don't have any leadership roles. I think, Lola, you had a term for it, the apprentice.
Oh, the apprenticeship model. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, that wasn't so much about leaders, but let me come to that, because there's something you said that I actually wanted to comment on, which is like, you want to meet all the humans.
Yes.
But I think you actually want to figure out, what are they all doing? Because that's actually the biggest, well, this is the assumption, right? But that's the biggest gap in your knowledge, is the more senior you are, the less you are aware of what every single person is doing and contributing. And that's actually the problem that the flattening was designed for. It's like forcing accountability. Yeah.
Leaders should know.
So you know. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you know,
but if you don't know, hold on. If you don't know,
you better get to know.
Continue that thought. Yeah, because I think it's an important call out. Like, if you don't know, then you need to take that time to know what your team is doing. Like, audit your team.
You have to audit the team.
You have to.
And this is probably one of those things where we've ended up with continued layoffs. It's, you got rid of a layer. You said, okay, I just want to move this layer out of the way because, you know, that was one strategy. And then when you paid attention to what the people beneath them were doing, you're like, I now have to ask questions about the value of that work. And then you've decided to cancel those projects. And so now you've had to get rid of more people because actually it killed the entire scope. So I think this is some of the internal why to where we've ended up. But to go back to your point, so one of the things that I've been paying a lot of attention to as jobs evolve, and you and I discussed before, like even my job has evolved, your job has evolved while not being laid off in this season, is leaders at every single level. Like even when you're reporting into the C-suite, as I do, you are a player coach.
Yes.
You have to do and you have to manage. The end. There's no longer a role where you oversee. You are accountable for doing and producing. And for me personally, that was actually what I wanted. I was running away from a people management job that wasn't producing anything. And I really felt like I felt hindered in what I wanted to do. So this mode suits me. But what I also recognize is what it looks like to then develop the people on your team is very, very different, right? It's like you have to do the apprenticeship model where it's like, I'm going to show you what I'm doing, but then I'm going to give you the responsibility to do the thing I was doing, and I'm going to do something else. But it's not that I'm just going to watch you and mark you. I'm going to do something else. So at I'd say 70% of the time, you are behaving as if you're a peer to the people who report into you because you're side by side with them working on stuff.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can coach them if you need to. And I was on a plane recently and I was watching this TV show from the UK called Blue Lights. It's actually not bad, but it's very much like just keep watching episodes of like super gritty drama stuff. And it's about the concept of police recruits. And I think the same thing applies. It's like basically every new police recruit was assigned to a more experienced police officer. And what these experienced police officers kept doing is putting the recruit front line. Every situation they came across, the rookie went first. The rookie had to do it. And then they would give them feedback. And obviously that did not always go well. But that's, I think, the only model you have left in a flatter organization. As a manager, you have to do. And then every single person in your team does next to you. But as your responsibilities are so broad, you can't do it all. You can't be the version of everything for every single person on your team. So you've got to take an apprenticeship approach where I'm gonna ask you to step up and I'm gonna ask you to role model. And now what I'm doing is I'm backing you up if you make mistakes, if it doesn't go so well. If I need to give you tips on, okay, now I know what your capability level is, you're gonna need to work on A, B, C, D, and then we're gonna come in and do that. And that mindset of apprenticeship as opposed to management, I think is actually the model that everyone needs to mentally shift towards in this kind of tech environment, because you're not going to scale the very comfortable wraparound and managing 3 people version of like tech leadership that happened before. And if you were an IC who could be promoted up 10 times before you had to, prove yourself, that doesn't exist anymore either, right? So it's got to be this apprenticeship mode, I think.
I agree fully. What's interesting as you were speaking was it made me think of a number of interviews I've been doing lately for candidates who have been out of work for a little bit of time. And as they're pretty senior individuals, and as they've been interviewing, their mindset is very much that of like the conductor, where they were not in the weeds work, nor can they speak to experiences or skills they have in either being player coach or even being close to the individual contributor space. And so that has been a disqualifier in a number of conversations because it's more and more an important skill that is not really spoken about as loudly. Yeah. It's not captured in job descriptions. It just is sort of a skill set that people are assuming without asking. And so as you were speaking, that just popped in my mind as a thing to call out. So if you are interviewing and you are looking at leadership roles, my guess is that if you freshen up on how you speak about your experience, or if you don't have experience that you can think of, like really spend time just like really checking, like when was the last time you had experience, or is there anything that you can do in the meantime to get an experience where you are coaching individuals through something so you can speak to, because I think that is a critical skill set that companies won't ask for, but they are probably looking for.
But let's be real, they should start to ask for it by now. But
Should.
it's like the process hasn't caught up with these changes. But in my view, it should be made clear that player coach is what we need. And actually, and I think we've mentioned this before, for a really long time, Apple only hired this way. And there was a whole discussion about the fact that you could not become the engineering manager of a team if you weren't the best coder in the team. And at any given point, as you went engineering manager, senior manager, director, VP, SVP, you still had to be one of the top coders in that team. Because if you couldn't do that, you didn't deserve to lead that team. And
yes,
it's brutal, but that is what they did for a long time. I don't know if it's still what they do now.
What's interesting to me is that, so I'm on the, I think that can be good, but I also think that can be bad in some cases, because I have seen people who are really amazing ICs turn into managers who thrive on making it challenging for their ICs because their bar for good is great, right?
So high. Yeah.
And there is no space for mistakes, like you have to do it their way. And so a lot of times you find teams spinning because they're trying to meet this manager in their own turf. And it you know, I've worked in those, I've worked with those. It can be very hard.
It can be very hard, but I actually think we need to make this the topic of another episode, because that leads to the open discourse in tech right now. And maybe it has always been open, but I think it's ever more present. This idea of like, is your team an A, or do you have a bunch of Bs and a bunch of Cs? Yeah. And I need to find, we will do an episode on this, and I will find the actual quote where somebody was talking about, you know, you want no Cs in your team, so you've got to get rid of all of them.
Sure.
And then you want as many A's as you can possibly get. And so you gotta make sure you're identifying talent. But they were literally like, the worst thing you can have in your team is a bunch of Bs. Because Bs slowly bring the culture for performance and the bar down, and you might not see it happen. And my immediate thought, similar to what you're talking about just a second ago, is that is amazing clickbait for like a management book, and you're having a chat with your bros and you want to let them know that this is performance culture.
Yeah.
But it is utter bullshit.
It
in reality.
Rough.
It is not how things get done. Like we need a whole episode.
We'll come back.
We need a whole episode.
We'll come back to that. I think we should switch from manager to individual contributor.
So you're an IC, and I think an IC in these scenarios, in these increasingly flat scenarios, the way I would recommend an IC sees themselves, or even like a manager, a person who wants to be a people manager who wants to grow, is to do exactly what we described. One, pay attention to the company.
Yes.
What is being rewarded? Why does it matter? And really take ownership of your own skill journey, right? If you see what's being rewarded in the company and you see value in adding that to your toolkit, then double the heck down on that thing and do things. Tell your manager that your manager now has a wider team. They don't have time to keep an eye on every little thing you're doing. Hey, manager, I'm going to take on this piece of work because I think it adds up to this, or you set an objective, or I heard the VP say this. Connect the dots. Say, are you okay with that? I'm going to get it done. Get it done. I did it. Look, this is the impact. Like, take absolute ownership. And I think this can happen even down to the junior levels, where you might think like you need to be given work. In tech, the moment you show that you're somebody who always needs to be given work, not that sometimes you need to be given work, but always need to be given work, the quicker you accelerate your lack of culture fit. Yeah. Even a junior, even an apprentice, even someone on the first day can be like, okay, well, you asked me to read the documentation. I looked to see that like some of the links were out of date. So I just gone ahead and tried to find updates, and I've updated the links. And now the onboarding guide is ready for the next person who wants to be hired. Yep. Like those things will help you stand out as an IC, because these are not, just because it's the responsibility of the manager to manage a team doesn't mean that they can catch every single one of these. And so if you see it, fix it. And I like company cultures that always said, if you see it, fix it. If you see something's broken, get in and try and fix it, because it teaches you that accountability. And so I think as an IC, you know, you may have just found that your favorite manager's gone and you've got, you know, you're a bit aimless. You still can take ownership of your journey and hold your new manager to account by showing them what you're doing and allowing them to actually take a point of view on it. And I'm not saying it's foolproof.
Yeah. I think, go ahead.
No, it's not foolproof, but it's more ownership. It's not passive. And I think being passive in that state is like the fastest path out the door, either through a layoff or resigning or burnout, even in sickness. Being active and taking ownership is the best way to change the state of your situation or to grow or get the opportunities that will allow you to develop in the way you want to.
I think to double click on something you said around your journey,
Mm-hmm.
I think an important thing that I talk to my team a lot about is making sure you know what your journey is or what you plan for it to be. A lot of times we get into a role and we just are in a company, we're aimless, sort of just trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to be doing? And you just take the next thing that someone gives to you or the next role that someone promotes you into. And a lot of times you talk to a person who's been in a role for a couple of years, like, I don't know how I became a manager. I've been here for a long time and here I am, right? But they
Those
had
people
no
are usually
intention.
petrified as well of being found out. That's stress.
Right. And they have no intent. Like that was not part of their plan. But then they're like, okay, well, here I am. They've developed none of the skills, whatever, right? So I think there's an intentionality that is important to call out as you are progressing in your career, to take that moment to say, okay, over the next 3, 5, whatever years, where do I see myself? You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have the specifics, but what you do, I think, need to know is generally, what are your interests? What are you really good at?
Mm-hmm.
And where could this get you? What are you curious to learn? What are you curious to do? And then saying, okay, I want more leadership skills. I want experience managing budgets. I want more speaking engagements. Whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you go to your manager and say, hey, listen, there are 5 skills that I need to work on. I'm really good at these things. I want to continue doing whatever, but I also want to make room for these new things. How can you help me? I think that is a great conversation to have, because a lot of times your manager is like, okay, performance review cycle. Yeah, they did great. They did great. Here are a couple of gaps. I want them to work on these 3 things. And then you move on to the next performance cycle and the next one, right? And there's no real meat in what is being worked on. And they probably assumed goals and skills for you because they didn't probably have much of a conversation with you to begin with, right? And you just kind of took, oh, well, they said that I am not a good communicator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll work on that.
Yeah.
Okay, like, is that an area of growth for you? Do you want, like,
This is the thing.
have the conversation?
And is this what's going to get you rewarded in that company?
Yes.
100%.
Exactly. So have the
100%.
conversation. Just ask for the thing. Tell them the thing. There's no world where anyone can read your mind.
I think I want to. It doesn't happen. I want to add one thing that, you know, I think also we're growing in this modern era of tech. We're growing, we're evolving, we're adapting our toolkit.
Yes.
And recently I had someone ask me, hey, I thought I was doing really well. I didn't get this thing. What happened? Why would I, you know, whatever. And I was like, you are doing well. And, you know, we're kind of like, I can see your growth. But in comparison, what's happened right now is you're not necessarily attached to the biggest things that we're prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really check myself, because I was like, oh, why isn't this person attached? And why aren't they working on that stuff? And I was like, actually, what ended up happening, and I think this is a key skill that ICs and managers have to develop in this modern tech economy, is a bunch of the things that we were prioritizing were invented by a person. They weren't like, strategy has been handed down and now everybody's got to have their work allocated. It's literally someone in the team, and it was like it wasn't always the senior person, identified an opportunity and was able to articulate it and codify it such that everybody just came in on that project and it was like, this is it. And so on the outside, it might look like that people were being attached to things. The
Yeah.
inverse was true. These people inherently understood what the company needed and created something that everybody came towards. And when I was giving them that advice, it was challenging for me, because I was like, this is the first time that I'm making it your problem to pitch me on a thing that you think I'm going to care about. And I actually felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I've reflected on it a lot. And, it's one of my coaching topics, because I do think this is the skill you need in this new tech environment. Is you've got to be able to read the room and find those value points in project. And you've got to be able to articulate them, and you've got to be able to pull them up, especially if you work in product, especially if you work in engineering, especially if you work in design, including content, in research. You're ultimately accountable to yourself. You want to work on stuff that's meaningful. You want to get that feedback. So join the game, join the party, be part of identifying those highest points of value. And as I'm talking, I can hear people that I've known and spoken to and worked with in the past feeling very allergic to that feedback. And I get it. But that's what it looks like, in my view, what I'm observing, to be employed in tech in this particular time. And if you don't want that, that's okay. That is not an indictment on what type of person you are or anything. But that is the reality of working and being successful in this climate right now.
Yes. Okay. I know we try to keep our
This is a longer episode, I think, today.
So we're going, let's bite size it. So let's think about it. What's our so what?
So what's. Okay.
Yes.
So you start. What's the so what for an IC, I think? Let's give you that one to start.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, I think, is being more intentional about your growth and development, connecting to the value you can bring the organization. That is keeping your eyes open, understanding how you make money, understanding what people are working on, understanding what you can attach your skill set to. And then it is having the conversation with your manager to tell them what it is you want to do and what it is you want to be able to accomplish. So I want to work on the thing. I want to develop these skills. I want to understand better how we make money, whatever it is. Say it out loud, and that will be your accountability buddy. And, have a vision for what success looks like for yourself, right? Because in the event you are let go, it would suck to tie yourself so close to the company that you feel a loss in your development or your opportunity fully because you lost the role, right? So I always encourage people, I'm like, don't just focus on your role at the company, but focus on yourself, right? What does good look like for you? And this company is a means to hitting some of that good.
Can I add one so what that I think is so relevant as you say that? Because I think that point of people attaching their identity to a job and then feeling that loss when that job is taken from them when they didn't choose to leave. I want to hold space for that feeling, because it's a human thing. It's like, I didn't decide to leave, it was taken from me. And so there is an emotional journey to get over that. But I also heed the advice of a boss who told me a long time ago, always be interviewing.
Yeah.
Because what also happens in that point is, if you haven't interviewed for a long time, you haven't understood the job market, you don't know whether or not you could even succeed to that level or at any level in any other company, because you're so closely aligned to what this company had chosen to do over this amount of time. You're going to struggle more than other people to get on your feet. And so you actually have to maintain some level of constantly renewing your CV and renewing your, talking to those recruiters who are in your inbox or not, or applying to a job randomly just to see, because you also have to give yourself the bounce back, right? It's one thing to have the emotional curve, very human, definitely give yourself that back. You got to come back, and coming back means knowing that you know how to talk about your skills and knowing that you know what the market might be doing. And so that's something that I would add. I guess to pick that up, the so what for a manager, I would then say is know that your job is now player coach. I don't care who you are. I don't care what level. Your job is probably at risk if you haven't looked yourself in the mirror and said, I am now a doer and a manager of things. So that's number one. Number two is, I think all of us need to take a view of what it looks like to apprentice people. And if you are now managing a wider team and you are now managing different levels and you've never done that before alongside having to be a doer, Think about how you can attach those people to more doing things. You will see people fail more often. You will see more mistakes made.
Yeah.
But that's part of their growth journey. And that's the only model left to you, because you can't give them this kind of like constant protective oversight. You don't have the capacity for it. And I think as a manager, if you don't shape shift out of that, again, you're going to burn out. You're going to struggle to succeed, and you're going to be potentially doing a disservice to yourself as an individual who's also growing in their career. So take the lay of the land, get into player coach, think about the apprenticeship model, and use that to put yourself back on good footing.
Yes. And know what your people do.
God damn it, know what your people do. Know what they do. We've made this show for you, and we want to hear your stories. We have our combined 35 years experience in tech. We have an incredible bank of experts to call on. We are your safe space. So send us your tech challenges, and we'll help you create some draft decisions through some real talk.
You've been listening to me, Mamuna Oladipo.
And me, Oyelayo-Pearson.
Edited and produced by me, Michael Blissa, with theme music by 031 MASH.
Email us at help@lostintechpodcast.com or DM us at lostintechpod.